Hello, writers, and welcome to the Researchers Writing Podcast. This podcast is for all your researchers in the sciences who want to write papers in a structured and time efficient way so you can get published in top tier journals at a calm and steady pace. In this podcast, we talk about how we can write papers that are clear, concise, and compelling, and how to make the process of writing less hard. My name is Dr. Anna Clemens, and I am an academic writing coach with a PhD in chemistry. In the Researchers Writing Academy, my online program, I've had hundreds of researchers get their papers published in their target journals using a streamlined writing process. If you want to succeed in your academic career, mentor your students effectively, and have your research make an impact in the world, you are in the right place. Let's get into it. Hello, researchers. Hello, writers. Thank you so much for tuning in to the Researchers Writing Podcast. Super happy to be spending the next half an hour or so with you. And today we have an interesting topic, which hopefully will give you a bit of a mindset shift. That's my hope. We're going to talk about why you maybe don't need to write like a native English speaker in order to get published. So this episode really is for all my non-native English speakers out there. Those of you who have English as their second language or maybe as their third or fourth language, and who simply struggle with writing papers in English, quite understandably so. You may have massive imposter syndrome because of this, super common. Maybe that imposter syndrome, maybe that low confidence that you have is fueled by feedback you've gotten from others, whether that's peer reviewers or I have a member in my program actually who used to get bad comments from her ex-husband. So it can come from your private circle as well. And that all results into, well, you're simply not confident writing papers in English. But this episode, before now, all you native English speakers think, okay, maybe this episode isn't for me, please stay because this episode is also for those of you who have English as their first language. Because I know that a lot of you are also struggling with writing papers, even though you speak English well in your daily life, like all the time. You've gone through school in English, college, university. And you feel like, well, writing papers should be fast for me. Like, why is this not faster? And well, it still takes you a lot of time to organize your thoughts and your data into kind of something coherent. And maybe you're not happy with what you produce, and maybe you often end up getting rejected by the journals you want to publish in. So if, well, any of this is true for you, then this is the right episode for you. And I want to invite you, well, to shift your mindset a little bit, whether or not you are a native English speaker. And because what I'm suggesting today, and well, you'll hopefully be convinced about this at the end of the episode, is that maybe your writing struggles, the writing struggles you are experiencing, don't have all that much to do with your English language proficiency. Maybe you're focusing on solving the wrong thing. And a while ago, and I'm telling this story in my free training as well, because I think it's so poignant. And a while ago, I talked to a researcher who told me that, well, they had received a comment from a peer reviewer on their article that read, well, this manuscript would benefit from editing by a native English speaker. And I know now, maybe some of you are rolling your eyes right now, because this comment, maybe it's like the most common comment peer reviewers make. It's so pervasive and it's really annoying, and I think it's actually pretty problematic. Let's talk about this in at a different time. But for that researcher who submitted the paper, who received that comment, the researcher I talked to, well, it hit her extra hard because she was, in fact, a native English speaker. She spoke no other language than English. So this was a pretty harsh comment for her. And to me, this just like shows so well how meaningless this comment often is and how misdirected it is. And how much it doesn't have to do, the quality of our paper doesn't have much to do with how well we speak English. I think when a peer reviewer writes, this manuscript would benefit from editing by a native English speaker, what they mean is, I was often confused and unsure about what the author wanted to say. They felt like, well, the authors didn't communicate this well to me. And this must be, the reason for this must be their English, because that's obviously the only reason why a paper could be confusing, unclear, or lead to misunderstandings. This is sarcasm. Okay, so this happens incredibly often. And the consequence of that is that, well, many non-native speakers are spending their time and money on improving their English, and even more common, hiring editors to do proofreading, to correct their manuscripts, when the actual reasons for them to get rejected or feel like, well, writing is really hard for me, lies actually elsewhere, lies not in their English language proficiency. Because I think what we sometimes forget is that, well, mastering the English language is really a different skill than writing. And academic writing or scientific writing, this is yet another skill. Well, just imagine an award-winning English poet. They will not intuitively be able to write a scientific paper that gets published. Like writing a poem and writing a scientific paper, even though they're both in English, completely different skill set. It's completely different genres. And in the context of writing scientific papers, what is a lot more important than knowing, for example, English grammar perfectly, having a large repertoire of phrases, knowing like fancy sentence constructions, or anything that native English speakers maybe intuitively know better. But this is less important than the actual 3 writing skills that I want to tell you now. And the first one is, in the context of scientific writing, writing scientific papers, I think what's most important, clear writing. Like your reader should always understand what you're communicating without getting confused or misunderstand you. Like this is the most important thing to master, I think, when you write scientific papers. The second skill, short and concise writing. You want to be able to communicate what you want to say in as few words as possible. You don't want to waste anyone's time. And also, the more lengthy things get, the more bloated they get, the more confusing they get. And the third point is compelling writing. You want your reader to stay engaged while writing. I think these 3 points, clear writing, short and concise writing, and compelling writing, these are really the scientific writing skill everyone needs to learn, whether or not English is your first language. This is not something you learn in school. Do you dream of writing a paper and submitting it in the span of 8 weeks or even less? Well, I mean, reliably for like every paper you write, then you really have to check out my free training that is available at researcherswriteinpodcast.com/free. In this interactive on-demand video, I walk you through each step of the streamlined writing process so you can write papers fast. But I'm not talking like crappy drafts. I mean clear, concise, and compelling papers that you can submit to a top-tier journal. You can access that free training at researcherswritingpodcast.com/free. Looking forward to seeing you there. Let's get back to the episode. Well, part of knowing these 3 writing skills, right, is knowing or needing to learn how to structure your paper so that you can communicate your message in the clearest, most concise, most compelling way. This is nothing an English-speaking high school teaches you. This is a new skill that you as a researcher need to acquire. Meaning, well, everyone needs to acquire this, no matter whether you're native or non-native English speaker. You may need to invest time, maybe money into learning, because the sad truth is, and I think this is where this misconception comes from, is that academia often doesn't provide us any resources to learn the skill. That it's kind of like you're kind of supposed to know how it works without that anyone ever teaches you. And this, I think, is often one of the reasons why we then think, well, I guess knowing English is enough because nobody else has ever told me that any other training would be required. I mean, for me, it's sad. For me, it's really sad that this is the way it is, that a lot of researchers do not get any training on this. But if you want for the writing process to feel less hard, if you want to get published consistently in the journals that you're targeting, then I honestly believe investing in training is your very, very best move. And also, I want to say that, of course, writing a paper is often more cumbersome for non-native English speakers. Like, I do not want to say that, writing a paper in English is exactly as difficult for native speaker than for non-native speaker. Like, as a non-native speaker, and I'm a non-native speaker too, like, we have to learn a whole language first. We had to learn a whole language first before we can even do scientific writing in that language. But that also doesn't mean that native English speakers don't struggle. And often the things they struggle with is exactly the same things that non-native speakers are struggling with. So it's simply, what it doesn't mean is that proofreaders or language editing will help you get published in the long run. I really don't think that that is the right or the, well, right or wrong is always hard to say, but I don't think it's the most effective way. Hopefully, I was able to spark some insights there. Maybe you shifted your mindset around being a non-native English speaker a little bit, or maybe if you are a native English speaker and you were wondering, well, why does writing feel so hard for me? Maybe this little episode, convinced you of what maybe other things may be needed. And I want to end this part of the episode with a quote by Ken Hyland. He's a British linguist, and he once wrote, "Academic English is nobody's first language." Now, I really love that quote. I'll leave it at that and let us move into our listener question segment of the podcast. Today's listener question is, how can I write in times of teaching and admin load? Don't have a name of the listener who submitted this, but well, I think this is a question that a lot of academics are asking themselves, especially in certain career stages. And I'm speaking of, well, starting an assistant professorship or being in an assistant professorship for a few years, moving into associate professorships. These are often very, very work intensive phases in your career. You suddenly have a lot more on your plate than you did as a postdoc or as a PhD student. And you have to do a lot of things you haven't been taught to do, like leading people, leading projects, well, a whole lot of bureaucracy, right? And also writing grants. And also, you don't have anyone anymore who gives you feedback on your writing. You don't have a PI anymore who gives you direction. You are the PI now, and that's something to get used to for sure. And yeah, there's so much to do. And with writing, the problem is, well, there's no deadlines. So nobody else is holding you accountable in most cases. So that means, well, you don't write, right? Or you don't write enough. You don't write as much as you want, which means you don't publish as many papers as you want. And writing then often also becomes this dreaded or stressful part of your work. And yeah, if any of that resonates with you, anonymous listener, and also for all of you who are listening, I'm not the one asking the question. I think this is a question that probably a lot of you are asking. And I think for you, it really pays off trying to figure out a way how you can still write, even with all the teaching and admin going on. And I want to suggest two things today that can help, that I've seen help. These are proven things. First one is co-writing. So in co-writing, you meet someone else to write together, whether that's in person or whether that's online. Both work excellently. It means you have an appointment in your calendar where you show up the same way that you show up to your meetings, which is incredibly powerful because we tend to not show up when we just have like a block in our calendar where we say, well, I want to write. And then it's just us showing up for the writing. We tend to, not honor that time as much and are more easily inclined to, well, maybe double book yourself or move it out of the way, move it to the next week. But when you know, okay, someone else will also write and have an appointment with them, you're much more likely to honor that commitment. We actually, in the Researchers Writing Academy, we have a lot of these co-writing opportunities because it is so powerful, because it works so well for a lot of our members. Like our member love us so much, they keep asking us to add more. And we already, I think currently we have like 5 facilitated ones per week at different times of the week. And then we always do per month 3 like longer sessions that we call like writing retreats where we meet for like 3 hours. And the nice thing is, I mean, it's amazing to see how much progress our members make on their papers, how they manage to finish papers, submit papers just because of these sessions. Also, what it does, having these co-writing sessions in place, is containing writing to a shorter span of time. I think what we sometimes tend to do is that we kind of carve out a whole day or several days when we go like, okay, I'm gonna get my writing done today. Like I don't have so much supervision to do. I don't have any grading to do. I don't need to prepare any lectures. Here are 3 days, and I'm gonna like dedicate these to writing. And that approach often doesn't work very well. And that is not to say that we never want a whole day or multiple day retreat, maybe. These are very good writing strategies, but ideally, as a basis of our writing routine, we also want shorter, more regular writing intervals of like an hour or 2 regularly. Because a shorter interval is more realistic to happen often, and you can achieve a lot when you write in these shorter intervals. And what's kind of connected to that thought is then the second suggestion. So my first suggestion, anonymous listener, was co-writing. Try it out if you haven't tried it yet. And the second one is, I call it lowballing. And lowballing means just tune down your expectations, tune them down to 1 writing sessions per week. If you don't currently have a writing routine where you write every week consistently, tune it down. Lowball, 1 writing sessions per week. Start with that. I think often we have more time than we think in our calendars. There's usually ways to optimize our calendars to fit in writing. And in my experience, it's actually often more an energy problem rather than a time problem as well. This is a little side note. So, but in terms of energy, what I really, really highly recommend is finding out when your energy is high, like when is your deep work time? Deep work, you probably have heard of this concept, was coined by Cal Newport, an author in the productivity space, and he has a book with that same title, Deep Work, which I highly recommend reading, by the way. Like if you haven't read Deep Work, total reading recommendation. Some things that are not perfect in that book, but I think the ultimate conclusion is amazing. And yeah, it's a very convincing read, and I think very, very inspiring if you want to start prioritizing deep work. And writing is like one of the deepest type of work we can do. So try to find out what time of the day you work deeply the best. For me, for example, that's the afternoon, and that's super rare. Like whenever I poll researchers on social media, also inside my program, for most, I feel like it's either the morning. They either have a deep work time in the morning or late at night. The afternoon seems to be an odd time, but that's me. So it just goes to show how different we all are. We all have different chronotypes. So different like kind of circadian rhythms. So trying to find out when you're the most alert, when writing flows really well, and trying to schedule that one session that you want to start with then is super good approach. From that, you want to build up your writing routine slowly, really. Just schedule one session per week to start for several weeks, a lot of weeks. Like, don't increase that one session until this has really become a habit, until you consistently honor that session every week. And my biggest advice is go slow to go fast here. I mean, this is, I don't know, for me, like a revelation that I have to have again and again, that whenever I'm trying to push, whenever I'm trying to go faster, it doesn't work. I need to go slower. And when I go slow and really take time building things, they work really well, and they work for a long, long time. Because right now you want to build a writing routine for the rest of your career. So don't look at like the next week or the next month, or even just don't only look at the semester. Think about the rest of your career that you want to write. All right. I also want to mention a really good resource on this is my friend, Dr. Kathy Mazak, who's an academic writing coach as well. And she teaches a lot about finding time to write, making time to write. And she has a podcast as well, actually. So you might want to check that out. It's called, I believe, Academic Writing Amplified. But you'll find her online. Yeah, and I just want to end this with saying, well, there are different seasons in an academic year always, and different seasons in your life. And I highly recommend adjusting your expectations accordingly to what season you're in currently. You absolutely do not need to write with the same intensity throughout the whole year or your career. Like, even when I say write every week consistently, there may be weeks when, well, it's like exam week, grading week, or something else is going on. Like you want to at a conference, or there's private events, or you're on vacation. Like I don't mean like you have to write consistently in these weeks, but that we understand, okay, there are different seasons. And because the reality is, in these weeks, most of the time, we are not going to write there anyway. So instead of beating ourselves up about it, I really recommend making these conscious decisions about when it's time to write and when it's maybe time to invest most of your cognitive energy into teaching or going to a conference, giving a talk, or other activities. So that you just set the expectations right, and you don't have to feel bad when you don't write, but you give yourself the permission to not write. And I'm giving you the permission now. You don't have to write when it's super busy right now. But the suggestions I just gave of co-writing and lowballing, as I call it, are more for, getting into this regular writing routine. If right now you realize, okay, this is not the season, this is not the semester, this is not the month, or this is not the week, do it later. Okay, I've talked a lot. I've answered this question, I feel like, in a lot of detail. Sorry for waffling. Sorry for rambling if I was. But yeah, it was a great question, and I hope my answer was helpful. Thank you so much for submitting this question and asking something that I think a lot of listeners are thinking about. And yeah, this is the end of the episode. Thank you so much for tuning in today. Talk to you all soon. Bye. If you would like to submit a question for me to answer on the podcast, please head to researcherswritingpodcast.com/question. That's researcherswritingpodcast in one word.com/question. And if you enjoyed this podcast episode, it would really mean the world to me if you could review it in your favorite platform, whether that's Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or whichever app you're using. The more reviews a show has, the more likely it will be shown to others who are looking for podcasts in the academic writing space. So thank you.